Welcome to some new r/malicious compliance stories, where people comply to the letter, but not the spirit of a request. I hope you had a great day. The first story is called Instructed Not to Help. I work in a public sector job that's a union shop with a pretty active union. The opportunity to comply with poorly worded directions comes along fairly often if you are a shop steward. While sometimes it's worth a grievance, sometimes it's just way more fun to do precisely as I'm told. They never seem to get that this is what comes next after I utter my favorite phrase in the world. Hey, would you mind sending me an email summarizing this so I have it to refer back to? Refused up until really recently, a mainframe emulation program that's the flower of 1970s technology for the bulk of the work we do. I'm a bit of a geek for this stuff, and one thing I figured out how to do a number of years ago was to write macros to automate actions. Everything from notices to be mailed out, to flipping through data screens looking for information, and even some data entry could all be automated. I was smart enough not to brag about this too much, so I didn't get voluntold to help support people with it. But I did tinker with it for years and had a pre-built toolset that I shared with anyone who asked. A friend I helped that way moved into management, and she contacted me asking for help with her staff, because she knew how useful it was, but not how to do it herself. I was representing a worker at the time who had been in a particular manager's crosshairs, to the point that they had IT put a completely unsubtle keylogger on her computer. I was helping her with something else and was looking over her shoulder at her screen when I saw one of the alerts it tossed up. I asked her about it, and she said it was weird, but she didn't know what it was. So I dug through her computer a bit and I showed her what was going on. The reaction from this manager was volcanic. She summoned me to her desk and admonished me about doing stuff that wasn't my job. Then she gave me very specific instructions that I was not, under any circumstances, to assist people with their computers or anything else that wasn't spelled out in my position description. Sounds good. Thanks for bringing that to my attention. Could I get you to shoot me that in an email so I can follow up with any clarification? Certainly, she beamed at me. This was going so well. About 2 weeks later, my manager friend, who had to pull some strings to get me released for a day to come out to her branch, came by, since I was gonna ride out with her. I showed her the letter from Miss Thou Shalt Not, who, incidentally, wasn't my supervisor, and who I knew full well hadn't told my boss about it, or their boss. Sorry, I was instructed not to help with this. Not much I can do. See? She read through it and looked back up at me with a small but evil smile. You saved this just for me, didn't you? Of course I did. Merry Christmas in August, I guess. She had no end of trouble with Miss Thou Shalt Not in the past, and the opportunity to rain some hellfire was just too good. She took the copy of the email with her, and they had a private meeting in one of the conference rooms, and were joined about 5 minutes in by their mutual supervisor, who I was also on good terms with. She never did tell me what was said behind closed doors. But before the end of the day, I had an email retracting the previous instructions, and the manager responsible never referenced it again. The best part is that the employee I'd been helping told me a day or two later that she'd stopped getting those weird alerts all of a sudden, and asked if I knew anything about that. The next story is called The Wrong Ride. This is something my mother did when they moved into the home they live in now. Where they moved to was a condo place with an HOA. This place has large 6-house condo buildings that were all the same, and standard 8-home apartment buildings. All the rent-to-own condos have a porch area in the back that leads to a parking lot. Some of which, my mother noticed, has fences. My mother handled most of the getting the house ready and dealing with the HOA. She learned pretty quickly that you had to get permission to do just about anything here. So after we moved in, she sent in a request to put in a privacy fence, like many of the others in the area. With the HOA's approval and guidelines, she finds a contractor, who she discovered was an old childhood friend, and has the fence put in. Cue HOA. My mom submits the contractor's document, stating the kind of fence and color and specs, only for her to receive a letter stating her fence needs to be removed due to not meeting HOA standards. Their reasoning? The technical term for the color white of the fence doesn't match what they allow. They stated they would fine my mother for every day the fence stood. My mother attempted to explain that the specific brand only used that white. To get the other white, you had to use a different, more expensive fence brand. My mother was peeved, to say the least. She went as far as to take pictures of all the fences, hers included, and demanded the HOA distinguish which was hers at a monthly meeting. They couldn't, but still didn't care. The paperwork didn't match. Thankfully, she had a friend in the contractor. She called him back and spoke with him about what the HOA said, and they hatched their plan. My mother and the contractor pull up the fence, and the HOA watches as it's taken away in a day. The next day, the same fence comes back and gets put in again. This time, the paperwork says paper right. It's been years, and my mother still has the same fence. The HOA never said anything further. Those fees were never paid, but it's fine. My mom doesn't use the pool anyway. The last story is called Read the Lease. I moved to the Big Apple in April from LA and signed a lease for an apartment sight unseen. It was the same price as my LA apartment, but the size was totally different. The only saving grace was that this apartment was pet friendly and had an in-unit washer and dryer. I hated living there, and after 2 months, when my job said I could work remotely, I packed up and went to the Caribbean. While I was there, I won the New York City housing lottery. For the first time in my life, I could afford to live by myself, in New York City of all places. I'd read in forums that landlords are usually pretty happy for tenants when they win and let you out of your lease no problem. So, in my optimism, I sent the management company an email, letting them know that I won the lottery and wanted to discuss terminating my lease early. They told me to speak to the brokerage to get my room filled. The brokerage told me that I would need to pay a broker's fee of $1,350 and still pay rent until they filled the unit, or I could try and fill it myself. I find a guy who was already applying with the broker for another unit, and he wants my room. Then management says they want the guy I found to pay $1,400. This is generally the worst apartment that I've lived in, so I don't feel right trying to get someone to pay $1,400 for this room. I'm in a bit of a time crunch, as the new guy wants to move in on August 1st, so I need to hire movers to take my stuff to storage the next day. But if I don't get the approval from management that everything is good to go on their end, then there's no point. So I need management to agree to let this guy take over my lease for the price that is on my lease. I argued that a new price would be a new lease, and if they want to do that, they would have to release me from the lease and market the apartment at this new price point. They refused, saying that I should pay the broker's fee or forfeit my deposit and continue to pay rent until they get my room rented. I'm upset because management basically wants to make more money and assumes no risk. I would end up paying until they rent out the awful room to someone. I tell them this is unfair and makes no sense. Then management tells me, well, there's no lease takeover in the lease. I'm confused because I vaguely remember reading something about a $500 fee for a lease takeover. Read your lease. We were doing you a favor before, but now we are only going by the lease. So I find my lease because I remember there being this $500 clause. I never found the $500 clause because written on the first page of the lease was length of lease. The term of this lease is beginning on 1st of February 2022 and ending on 31st of August 2022. I'm elated. My move-in date for my new place is 25th of August, so I no longer need to rush. All because management told me to read my lease. I give them back a call and request the email address to send my 30-day notice of intent to vacate, or if it should be mailed, as it's not specified in the lease. Management tells me that I can break the lease. I tell them I'm not. It ends next month. I sent them a photo of the first page of the lease. He sputters and says, "You know it's a year-long lease. This is a typo. As you know, I just took over managing the building and I inherited some bad leases. I didn't notice, but I gleefully respond, well, I was doing you a favor before, but now I can only go by the lease. If the lease says my term ends next month, I have to honor that." He hangs up, furious that this is happening. At this point, I'm no longer concerned about hiring movers. So when he calls me back at 8 PM, I am ready to tell him the cutoff for the movers was at 4 PM and that I will move out according to the lease. But he starts the conversation in a somber defeated voice. "You can move out on the 31st. We just have to go according to the lease. We will do a final walkthrough and give you back your deposit." As I am still in the Caribbean, my cousin will be subletting for August and I will be moving into my new apartment when I get back. Everything worked out in the end, all because I read my lease. And with that, we end today's video. Let me know what you think about the stories. On a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate the stories in today's video? I hope you enjoyed the video. If you like what I do and would like to support me, please subscribe and hit the like button. I hope you have a great day. Stay safe. Bye bye.